Hello students, I hope everybody is fine. So please look for the today's tutorial on animal tissue as you can see on the screen board. So again I request you all to keep your textbook and notes copy and pen pencil along with you so that everything we will having in this tutorial should be understood to you. Okay, so let's begin. So as far as animal tissue is concerned, so we break them into or we can divide them into some parts. Okay. So the first part is the epithelial tissue. So this tissue is basically a protective tissue because it covers the whole body externally as well as internally. Okay. So it is basically a protective tissue. So it has lot many subparts or subtypes. So number one is squamous. So please check out these numbers in your textbook. Squamous, okay. SQ U, write it down again. So SQUAMOUS, okay. Squamous tissue, that is flattened tissue. Then second is called cuboidal. So cuboidal tissue. Then third one is called columnar. They are just like a column. So columnar tissue. Then fourth one is ciliated. So write down that word. The fourth part is ciliated and the last one is glandular. So glandular. So these are the some types of epithelial tissue. So starting with squamous, cuboidal, columnar, ciliated and glandular. So make sure know these names. So because when we do in them in detail, you should be knowing which type of these tissues are. Then move to the second tissue, second type of animal tissue, which is been more concerned with movement and locomotion. Hence the name is muscular tissue. Okay. So the muscular tissue we have got in a textbook, which is being divided into three subparts. The first one is striated, second is unstriated and non-striated, and third is cardiac. Okay. The first one is striated muscles. Okay. STRIATED. So striated, non-striated and cardiac. So these three subparts come under the category muscular tissue. Now move into the third one. We call it connective tissue because they are binding, supportive in function, okay, as well as transportation is one of their big job. So this connective tissue is further having a good flow chart of its own. So it has number of types. So number one is areolar. So AEROLAR, okay, areola. Then is adipose, then is skeleton, and then is fluid connective tissue. So under fluid connective tissue, we have blood and lymph, okay, blood and lymph we will study under the fluid connective tissue. Under skeleton connective tissue, we have again two parts. One is called cartilage, other is called bones. Okay. First is cartilage and second is bones. Thereafter, we have the part called supporting connective tissue. So, in there as the word says supporting, they will support some statement or some part of body line in terms of connective tissue. So, they are tendon and ligaments. Okay. So, write down the name. So, they have tendon, TANDON, tendons and ligaments. Ligaments. So, we will read about them in detail when you move into the whole tissue separately. Okay. So, again after running through the whole flow chart here, pause the video and read the name, write the name so that the things are clear about you, clear about the whole data. Okay. Then the last one among the animal tissue is the nervous tissue and its main job is control and coordination. Okay. So, everything that you can do with your body line, thinking line, control and coordination is basically the job for nervous tissue. Let us now see one by one as we move in tutorial. So, underline the first epithelial tissue that we have just read it. So, check out the features of epithelial tissue, okay, the characteristic features you can call it. So, they are made up of tightly packed cell, okay, and arranged in layers one over the other, and they cover the body externally surface as well as internal cavities. I have told you. So, these features must be known to you. The cells are packed in the layer system and they cover the body internally and externally, and these tissue and these cells form most of the glands in our body. Okay. So, that is as far as epithelial tissue is concerned. Now, then you move to the second called the connective tissue. So, this connective tissue name suggests, so they are going to have a extracellular matrix which perform the salient or silent roles in the tissue function. So, in these type of tissues, basically they are classified into various subtypes, so that we have just told you in that flow chart. So, adipose, cartilage, bone and blood. So, these are the subparts of connective tissue. Then comes your muscles and muscular tissue. So, you can see this muscle tissue is made up of muscle cells and they have ability to decrease their length and hence they expand and contract. As a result, we can move our body parts. So, this was the muscular tissue. Then we have the nervous tissue. So, these are the highly specialized cell because they carry on information. So, they have something called neurons with them. So, we discuss about them when we study neural tissue separately or the nervous tissue separately. So, these tissue receive information from both internal and external environment, and after receiving the information we act accordingly by sending the signal or the impulse. So, these are some data of the tissue which we are going to study now. Now, here we begin with the epithelial tissue. So, you can please check out your diagram in your textbook and then label them properly. Okay. The first one is squamous. So, you can see the only write down 3 labelings. The whole pink zone you can call them as a cytoplasm having a dot in center called nucleus, and the cells are joined together by a cementing substance. Okay. So, these 3 labeling is more than enough for squamous. Then similarly look for columnar. So, in this columnar epithelial tissue, I have told you they are just like column, you can say standing tall. So, we call them as a columnar cell. Again they have a nucleus, and now make sure label the last part or the basement part here referred as basement membrane. Okay. So, this was the squamous and the columnar. Then we move into the third part called stratified squamous. So, stratified, okay, stratified squamous. So, in this part of labeling, write down the terms. Again, the whole pinkish zone is the cytoplasm. In each cell you have a nucleus, and again they are joined through a cementing substance, and of course the lower base is the basement membrane. So, again pause the video when you will write them again, so that the labeling can be done properly. Okay. Then we have the third one or fourth one called glandular epithelial tissue. So, here they have something called goblet cells. So, write it down, goblet, G-O-B-L-E-T, okay, goblet cells, and of course the mucus. So, these are enough labeling for them. So, thereafter we have got the fifth one, the cuboidal epithelial tissue, and in this you can again see the same labelings, the cytoplasm, in the center they have the nucleus, again the cementing material, and of course the basement membrane. So, you can see these names are quite common in all labelings, but just you have to know where they are. Then we have a ciliated epithelial tissue, as the name states. So, they have a cilia, and then again the cells are in column like. So, they have a columnar cells. nucleus and basement membrane. So these terms we already have told you. So these are the types of epithelial cells or tissue. Now the second tissue was muscular. So in that muscular tissue, as I've told you, there are of three types: striated, unstriated, and cardiac. Okay. So in these three types, first we can see the striated. So again they have a nucleus. Every cell has a nucleus, and they have a membrane called sarcolemma. Okay, sarcolemma. So write down the word sarcolemma. Okay, because they have a cytoplasm referred as sarcoplasm in these muscular tissue, and this sarcolemma bounds it. Then again they have a nucleus, and they have a light and dark bands which give them a distinctive characteristic features. Similarly, in case of unstriated, again I have just told you the cytoplasm is called sarcoplasm, bounded by sarcolemma here, again nucleus, and then you have fiber-like structure called fibrils, myofibrils, okay, MYO fibrils, FIBRILS, myofibrils. That was in unstriated muscular tissue. And then we have the one of the important stuff called the cardiac. So this is the main muscles that makes our heart. So in these cardiac, you have some differentiation, as they can see the demarcation line between them called the intercalated disc. Intercalated, CALATED, okay, disc, DISC. So write down this name, intercalated disc. Then again they have thin sarcolemma, then they have something called branch fibers, and then nucleus and sarcoplasm. So these terms are quite repeating in muscular tissue. So that gives you some idea that how these labelings are for these tissues. So again, draw them properly, look the diagram from your textbook, and thereafter label them properly and write them. So now we begin one by one how these tissues or the cells are having their concerned features. So in case of cuboidal epithelium tissue, so you should know they consist of single layer of cells, and they are tall, as I have told you. So they are just like a column, okay, or the cuboidal tissue in the form of cube. So they are tall, and the cells are tall, and they are wide. And the important function for this particular tissue is secretion and absorption. So underline this term. Secretion, they secrete the chemicals and then absorb it, and thereafter they are very much available in the collecting duct of kidneys, pancreas, and salivary glands. So these are the features for cuboidal epithelial or epithelium tissue. Now move into the other epithelium tissue here. So in this case, as I have told you, the epithelial tissues are of various subtypes. We have just seen cuboidal there. So we have squamous, columnar, ciliated. We have just seen all them in their respective diagrams. Now write down the features of these particular tissues. So in case of squamous epithelial tissue, so they are also called the pavement epithelium, and the cells are again arranged end to end like a tiles on the floor. That's why the name pavement. You can see how the cells are arranged just like a floor tiles, and the cells are polygonal in shape, and it forms the delicate lining of cavities. Underline the last one. So they form the lining of cavities. Then further, these delicate lining cavities basically are found in mouth or esophagus or pericardium, the layer of the heart, and blood vessels. So these are the locations where they form the layering. And epithelial cells are arranged in many layers, as you can see it in the diagram. Then comes the cubical epithelium, or we have just seen the cuboidal. Then let us see the other types. for the same epithelial tissue. So, first one you have read about, second you got it. Now, then comes the columnar epithelium, okay, columns, COLUMNAR, okay, columnar epithelium tissue. So, again in these the features are, so they are just like pillar like structure, and they are basically formed in the lining of stomach, okay, small intestine and colon. And they also border, if you had the name called villi, so we have a microvilli also in intestine where the absorption takes place. Then the next tissue under epithelium category is ciliated, as the name states. So, they have cilia approximately scattered throughout the body surface. The cells could be cubical or could be in column form, and on its free surface present a protoplasmic outgrowth called cilia, okay, the hair-like structure, and it helps in the movement of ova in the fallopian tube that we study about when we talk about reproductive system. So, these are some of the subtypes for the epithelial tissue. Now comes the second and the other important tissue in animal called connective tissue. And in this connective tissue, first write down the feature of connective tissue. So, number one, these cells of this tissue are widely spaced and embedded in a intercellular matrix. That means you just write first thing, so they are widely spaced. Then this matrix means the space or free space in the cell. It depends upon what type of function they are going to perform. So, depending upon the function, the matrix is approximately dense hard or could be soft, you can call it. And then there are white and yellow fibers present in the matrix. So, write down this one, the white and yellow fibers present in the matrix. And the basic function I have told you is to provide support to different organs and keeping them in place. So, they act as anchor, you can call it, to provide support to different organs and keep them into their respective place. Now, you can see they are further into two types, as I have told you. Connective tissue, first is the fluid connective tissue. So, these are the diagrams from your textbook, okay. So, please check them, the various types of blood corpuscles or blood cells, and these diagrams has to be drawn in your notes copy, okay. They are very much drawn in your textbook. So, first is the neutrophil, eosinophil and basophil. So, these names are mentioned there, please copy them from there. And then lymphocytes and monocyte and platelets, and I hope you know what are platelets. So, they help the blood to clot. So, these diagrams are drawn in your textbook, please copy them from there. Now, let us see some features of the blood. So, as I have told you, it is connective tissue, and here the blood matrix, this space in the cell is filled with blood plasma and having the blood cells. So, I hope you know the blood cells, some of them you should be knowing it. Number one is red blood cell, then is white blood cell, and then there are platelets, okay. These are some of the blood corpuscles. The name should be known to you, must be known to you. And these materials help in the blood corpuscles, they help in the transportation of materials or nutritious substances or gases or excreted products or hormones in the whole body system. So, blood itself is a very important connective tissue, perform lot many jobs. So, please refer the textbook for further information, but whatever is been told here, please copy it down and write them properly. Then comes the component of blood, just I have told you. So, one is the first component called plasma, and in this plasma you can see it form approximately 55% of the blood, and in plasma itself the 90% is nothing but water. So, apart from plasma, the blood have corpuscles that I have told you, also called blood cells. So, these the various types of blood corpuscle I have just told you in the last framework. The first is the RBC called red blood cell, but you should be knowing the name, technical name. It is called erythrocyte, ERTHYROCYTE. C-Y-T-E-S, okay. Erythrocytes. Erythrocytes, okay. That is the name for RBC, and they contain a red color respiratory pigment called hemoglobin, okay, called hemoglobin. So make sure, so the respiratory pigment in RBC is hemoglobin, that we all know help in the transportation of oxygen. So this must feature for RBC, you should be knowing it. Then the second blood corpuscle is called the WBC and is referred or also being referred as leukocytes, okay. Leucocytes, leukocytes, and they are the main soldiers of your body that protect our body against any type of infections. So these are the two main category for, or two main types of WBCs. As I have told you, so these WBCs are also called soldiers of the body, and as far as their shape is concerned, so they are basically irregular in shape, and they are basically phagocytic cells, matlab they engulf the damaged cells also, and including bacteria and other foreign particles. As a result, they protect our body against any infection. Then there are various types of these, which I have told you to draw from the textbook diagram. Just I have just mentioned it: monocytes, lymphocytes, basophils, neutrophils, and eosinophils. So these names are mentioned there. You can check it for your reference. Okay, you must know the types are monocytes, then lymphocytes, then basophils, then neutrophils, and then eosinophils. Okay, and the last component for that blood cells are blood platelets, and we call them as thrombocytes, THROM, okay, thrombo, CYTES, thrombocytes, thrombocytes. So they are also referred as blood platelets, and as I have told you earlier, they are basically involved in blood clotting, okay. So they are involved in blood clotting to prevent the blood loss. Now move into the other type of connective tissue where the matrix or the inner cell space is filled with hard substance. So we call them as skeleton tissue, okay. So it has a hard connective tissue, I have told you, and form a supportive framework. So they are basically form support or supportive framework, okay. And again, it has been told earlier, they are of two types, bone and cartilage. So write it down, bones and cartilage. So for first bone, you can just see these are the same structure drawn from your respective textbook. So in that whole diagram, check out two terms that should be knowing to you, okay. Number one is Haversian canal, and then number two is the bone cell called osteocytes, okay. So they are called osteocytes, OEST, or OS you call it, OS, and TEOCYTE, okay. Osteocytes are the bone cell, okay. Then there is one word here that you have to take a refer called canaliculus, okay. Canal, then culus, canaliculus. So please check out the diagram from the textbook. They are all drawn from your respective book, and so you should be knowing about them quite in detail. Then matrix of the bone is, as I have told you, is very hard because it consists the salt of calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate, okay, and protein. So filled with protein. So bones matrix is hard. Why? Because it is filled with the salt of calcium. So calcium phosphate, calcium carbonates. Then here, as I have told you, the bone cells are called osteoblasts. The osteocytes are embedded in the matrix, and bone matrix in the form of concentric layers, lamellae, we have just seen in the diagram, and they have a concentric layers of matrix in which the bone cells are embedded. Then the long bones, so thigh bones basically, you know, they are hollow. Why they are hollow? Because they have a cavity, as marrow cavity called bone marrow cavity, and in this bone marrow, you know, your blood cells or corpuscles are made. All RBCs and WBCs are synthesized in bone marrow. So, check out this data from your respective books for the explanation, because these two topics are quite important for examination point of view. Okay. Then comes the second type of respective cells in the same cartilage system. So, they are called cartilage. Okay. So, these cartilage again have got their own cells. They are called chondrocytes. So, write down the name chondrocytes. Okay. CHON, chondro, DRO, cytes, CYTE. Sometimes we ask you name the cartilage cell, then you should know it. They are called chondrocytes. Okay. Then they have a matrix there, as I have told you here, and the tissue in this case are less harder as compared to bones, and the elasticity of this particular tissue is presence of a protein. Okay, this protein by the name called chondrin. So write it down, chondrin, CHONDRIN. Okay, so this chondrin gives this tissue elasticity, you can call it. And presence of chondrin I have told you, and the cells are called as chondroblasts. I have just told you in this diagram, and that is the cartilage, that is basically a soft tissue one. Then we have the other types called areolar. Again, this diagram is been taken from your textbook, so make sure these labeling are must. So in this diagram, you should know 2-3 names. Number one is macrophage, other is the mast cell. Okay, so these macrophage and the mast cells, their definition you have to locate and find from the search engine. Okay, see what are macrophages. Nowadays we need them more, and the mast cell, because they are in case of macrophages, you know, they again protected body. Then comes the after the areolar tissue, we'll move into the adipose tissue first and then come back to it. Okay, so in these adipose tissue, so we have just said they are the fat collecting tissue. Okay, so they store fat more or less in them. So their cells is called adipocyte, and as I have told you, and these store fat. The cells are called adipocytes. So underline the word adipocytes. Okay, so they are referred as adipocytes, and again they are found beneath your skin, called subcutaneous, below the skin, and the main function for them is that they act as insulator and prevent the loss of heat. Okay, so they act as insulator and protect our body against heat loss. So after areolar tissue, we have a adipose tissue, just we have told you. Now come into the segment called muscular tissue. As the name states, you have the data that why they are referred like that. So basically they are involved for movement of body parts, and they have got long muscle fibers in them, and as they can contract and relax, so we enable the body to move. So this tissue is further divided into 3 subparts. One is striated, okay, then cardiac and non-striated. So these parts and this diagram again from your textbook. So first is striation, so you can see, so there is striation on the whole tissue body line, hence the word striated. And in case of the function, they are voluntary muscle because they are under your will, that means you can control their movement. And the muscles, fibers or cells in this tissue is multinucleated, write it down, and unbranched. So these are some features of these cells of this tissue, and they have a thin membrane, which is called here a new word in muscular tissue called sarcolemma and sarcoplasm, because here the cytoplasm is called sarcoplasm. So write down the word sarcoplasm, SARCOPLASM. Plasm, sarcoplasm. So here we call the cytoplasm in muscular cells as sarcoplasm, okay? And that is as far as striated is concerned. Then we have the second one called the non-striated. So here again the diagram you can see it has a nucleus and the spindle shaped muscle cells. So features for these are, so they are involuntary, okay. So earlier was voluntary, they are involuntary, means they are not in your control. So they are also called smooth muscles. So second name for them is, they are also called smooth muscles, okay. Smooth muscles, and they are again nucleated, spindle shape, and the other word that you should know is the nucleus are found in the walls, okay. The muscles are found in the walls of where? Stomach, intestine, urinary bladder. To underline the location where you can find them, you can find them in the walls of stomach, intestine, urinary bladder, bronchi, that is in the lungs, and the iris of the eye. So these are the locations where you can find these muscles, and we know these tissues are not in our control, so they are involuntary. So among these we have the most important called cardiac muscle. The name says cardiac, so it is concerned with human heart, and it is the one of the most working muscle in your body which never get tired, okay. So in this case, so they are again involuntary, so you can't control their movement. They are only found in the walls of the heart, that should be known to you. And they are again uninucleated, and underline the whole word, uninucleated and branched. So that is as far as cardiac muscle fibers are concerned. To make sure in cardiac or the muscular tissue, we have two terms. One is sarcoplasm. Sarcoplasm, the cytoplasm here is called sarcoplasm and bonded by sarcolemma, okay. So these two terms, please make sure it should be in your mind. Now comes the one of the last tissues in the animal tissue system, and most important, called the neuron or the nervous system. So in case of these nervous tissue, so make sure this diagram you again copied from your textbook, and label them properly, okay. As you can see, these names we have done in the other classes also. So these are dendrites, and originating from, you can see they originate from the base which is thoda spatial thickness called dendron, okay. Dendron, the origin from where the dendrites arise. Then in the center they have the nucleus, and around the nucleus we have a structure surrounding them called Nissls granules. Nissls, apostrophe S, okay. Nissls granules. We already have done, I think so, in your last year box. So Nissls granule. So label them again. And then we have the cell body. So you better write the cell body as cyton, okay. And the long tail is called axon, okay. So long tail is called, this long tail is called axon, and the cell body is called cyton. And then you can see they have the layer over it. So write down the word called myelin sheath, and you can see there is a gap between them. So write these gaps as nodes of Ranvier, okay. Nodes of Ranvier. So these are some of the names that you should be knowing about them, and this diagram must be properly drawn in your respective notes copies, okay. Then they have the nerve ending at the base that you can see here. From here the new neuron joined them, so that junction is called synapses. Okay. So make sure these new terms should be written down properly and then learn them. Now let's come for the feature of these. So number one, so they are the specialized tissue because that gives you the property to respond to stimuli. Stimuli means the external factors or internal factors to which we respond, called stimuli. And then the functional unit of the nerve cell is called neuron, the diagram that you have seen above. And again you can see they have said it, the cell body is cyton, that I already have told you, which is covered by a plasma membrane. So, that is as far as cyton or the neuron is concerned. Then you can see that parts which we have just told you. So, one is dendron. These are the hair like structures which arise from the cyton, and dendron is further divided into smaller branches you can call dendrites. So, write down the word dendrites. So, please, these are some new terms, new words, very important for examination point of view. So, write them very carefully in it. Then I have told you they have a long tail called axon. So, it is a long tail, just I have told you, it is covered by a sheath. I have just told you medullary sheath, okay. And axon of one neuron is closely placed to the dendrons of another neuron. So, they get connected there, where they form electrochemical waves that we will study and grow higher in the classes. But you should know that the junction where they both unite is basically referred as synapse, okay, or called synapses. So, please run through the whole presentation or this tutorial again in the complete sense of uniformity. Read the textbook first and draw these particular diagrams, and then frame these questions and put this question in your respective notes copy, and after doing it revise them. So, have a nice time, take care, bye.